Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What a Fustercluck. I'm your host, Lolita Keys. And if you have not already done so, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the What a Fustercluck podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And let's go ahead and jump into the thing that struck me the most this week as I listened to my carousel of crazy podcasts. And that is AI, tech, and our kids. So I've already done several episodes on my thoughts with kids, technology, and video games, and it is honestly probably in the top 5 biggest areas that I struggle with as a parent in this day and age of still relatively young kids and what do I do next? I can already see the hold that gaming has taken on my kids and feel like I've put up the appropriate guardrails there. But if you asked me now if I still would have allowed them to play on this kind of technology back when I thought it was like innocent and fun and a way for them to connect with their friends, I would 100% say I wish I never gave it to them. And I want to say something to any of the critics that are out there, because I feel like as parents, we're super judgy against each other. And then, of course, there's people that aren't parents that like to judge us and think that they would be doing it better. But an interesting thing to point out is that our kids, for the most part, if your kids are about the same age as mine, went through the COVID era. And so for many of us, we were just desperately looking for ways for our kids to still feel connected in a world that was kind of shutting down around them and turning super weird with having to wear masks to school or maybe not being able to go to school, with parents maybe losing their jobs or being, put in a position where they had to work from home with young kids or middle-aged kids, and just how difficult and hard that was. And so I would say that part of my decision in giving my kids technology did have something to do with that. Because you know what? If we're being honest, it's kind of like having a little built-in babysitter where you can give your kid the thing and it will occupy them for a certain amount of time. And for me, the important thing was that they weren't just kind of sitting in their rooms playing all by themselves on this technology alone for hours and hours. So, they do have time limits. I do prefer that when they are gaming, they're gaming with friends so that it's interactive and more fun and more social for them. But of course, coming out of COVID and in the state where I live, things were definitely not as locked down for as long as some other places like New Jersey or California, for instance. So for me, it just turned into one of those, all right, this is a part of our lives now. And I just didn't have the wherewithal at the time to be like, abort mission, take these things away, because they're going to become like an extension of your kids. And so again, all I could do is just try to plug in restrictions, time limits, certain days of the week that they could even go on and things like that. But I'm not perfect and I'm still trying to navigate this myself. But this past week, I was listening to a podcast that had Tristan Harris on the podcast talking about his new AI documentary that I believe is available on Netflix. Let me actually look that up so I can give you guys the name. Okay, so the name of the documentary is called The AI Doc, or How I Became an Apocalyptimistic. Try to say that 5 times fast. Anyway, recently released documentary. I have not watched it yet because, quite frankly, I'm afraid if I do, I'm going to go into a tailspin of all the bad things that could possibly be happening. But it was clear to me just in the interview that Tristan Harris he also had the documentary called The Social Dilemma, which I've also talked about before, and I highly recommend. It's a little old at this point, but it still applies. And he's one of the very people who worked on the platforms and built the systems that are now reshaping our literal reality. And he's been sounding the alarm for years now, warning about the dangers of social media and our kids, warning about the increases that we're seeing in anxiety with our kids, warning that artificial intelligence is about to fundamentally alter how humans think, relate to each other, and perceive truth. So on the flip side of this, the other interesting thing that's happening in parallel as he's trying to sound the alarm and spread the information and get more people aware so that they start talking to their leaders out in, their state and local political positions, And just starting to kind of reach out to these people and tell them, look, I'm not going to vote for you if you don't start supporting agendas that are going to be a little bit more restrictive and slow down this AI train because it is coming so rapidly and no one is really taking the time to think carefully because quite frankly, we're up against foreign countries, sometimes adversaries, and it's like we're all in this AI race because if we don't do it, someone else will. And then they're going to use it for nefarious reasons. And we're going to be behind the ball and we're going to get like taken over and it's going to be apocalyptic and blah, 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 blah. And so this almost needs to be even bigger than in our country, but more of like a global summit where everybody kind of comes together like the thing we should have done when we were inventing nuclear weapons and said, hey guys, maybe we should pump the brakes on this because we could literally abolish civilization and completely wipe out everyone with this type of weaponry. And AI, in my opinion, could literally turn into the same thing. And so it's like either we're going to learn the lessons that history is teaching us, which we seem to have a hard time doing, or we're going to grab the bull by the horns on this one, start to figure out that this could truly be apocalyptic, even if it's not going to, take over the nuclear codes and start shooting bombs at one another, and just going completely rogue. But just from the perspective of the amount of jobs that it's impacting and what is this going to do to the human civilization from the perspective of, guys, the utopia is not coming. Universal basic income, like how are we ever going to do that? Who's going to manage that? Who still gets to be middle class? Who still gets to be upper class? Who's going to end up being poverty stricken forever? Like at the end of the day, who decides what is universal basic income? How do we get it? Where are we printing this money? What is that going to do, to people's like ability to want to be prosperous or find purpose in life if we're all just letting the machines kind of do everything? And I know that this sounds doom and gloom, but the reality is this is a major possibility. It is an actual possibility and something that could happen in the very, very near future if we don't start coming together globally to have these conversations about what can we do to put up the guardrails so that we're not completely dehumanizing our civilization and going like fully robotic and diving into this technology with no guardrails, but still be prosperous with it and thoughtful in the approach. And right now, I just don't really see that happening anywhere. And this kind of like takes me back to the conversation on what we're seeing in places like Australia and other foreign governments that are starting to quietly step in and either float restrictions or implement restrictions on things like screen time for kids and raising the alarms with kids about digital addiction, about the inappropriate use of AI and the things that kids are going to be able to do. We're handing kids a mini computer that has more power than almost anything ever imagined and expecting them to be mature adults with it and make good decisions. And as parents, I feel like we look at things like giving your kid an iPhone or a Samsung or any kind of smartphone as just like this innocent thing. Their friends all have it, like get with the times. And I can relate to that. At the same time, though, there are so many technically challenged parents in the world today that just have no idea how to appropriately lock down their kids' technology. Even when you think you're doing it right, you never really know. And our kids are so smart. They're so smart and they're already so tuned into this technology that they're practically dancing circles around us anyway, breaking in, to the phone, figuring out the passcode, getting around the parent some way or another, and using the phone inappropriately. And far too many of us are relying on the innocence of our children or the behavior of our children to assume that they can handle a smartphone in their pocket. And so this isn't me telling you not to get your kids phones. You have to do what's best for your family. But if I were to ask you honestly, I joked around with my one son who's getting ready to go to middle school and he's begging for a phone. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get you a flip phone. And he is so humiliated by the thought of having a flip phone, which I think he could start a trend, but whatever. I'm not cool anymore. Now I'm just a mom and I don't know anything. And I'm like, dude, you need to call me and text me. That's all you need a phone for. And you can do that on a flip phone. You do not need a smartphone. And I also have to laugh because we're giving these kids these $1,000 technology bricks and we're locking them down so strategically, which we should be doing, but we're locking them down so strategically. And I just have to laugh because it's like, what the hell is the point? What is the point of giving the kid the fancy phone when he can't do shit with it? It is so locked down, he can't do anything. He can't cruise the internet because we don't want him Googling something innocently and then, like, boobs and butts pop up, right? We don't want to give them even apps as innocent as, like, here's Amazon, go ahead and build your birthday list. And next thing you know, they're finding pictures that like say stuff about like big booty hoes or whatever the hell, And you think all of these things are so innocent, like a kid's Google option or whatever, but you really truly don't know. Even YouTube. I cannot tell you how many times my kids have come home and told me about a clip that they saw on YouTube at their after school program, which is supposed to be a controlled environment, that is a clip that they should not be watching, not because there's nudity, but sometimes just because it's horrific or it's something inappropriate for like a younger child to see that's going to totally freak them out. And, they won't be able to get that visual out of their brain. And we all think everything is so innocent, but I just crack up and I laugh when I think about, even for myself, getting my kid an iPhone and thinking, what's the point? He wants this for a status symbol because kids feel cool when they have brand new phones. And so the only way that we're going to remove that you're cool because you have a phone thing is by not getting them the damn smartphone. Because somebody make the case for me. Help me understand. Help me understand. What is the point of getting your kid the latest and greatest iPhone? Even if it's not the latest and greatest iPhone, it's still a massive piece of technical innovation. And locking it down to the point where they can't do anything on it. It's functioning at maybe 10% of its capacity. And they're taking a bunch of like silly pictures and who the hell else knows what they're doing with it. That they're allowed to do or that you haven't restricted them on doing. And just think about that. Because if you really are honest with yourself and you're thinking about that, it's funny, right? It's almost like, who's the asshole? Like, who's the fool? You are, allowing the cell phone companies and these phone manufacturers to continue to grow their bottom line, continue to grow their profit by giving your kid this phone, which they have no business having, if we're being honest and realistic. And we're giving it to them at like 90% of its capacity. So what is the point? If we just normalized a standard cell phone for kids, then the market would demand a standard cell phone for kids, and parents can feel confident that their kids can have access to a phone to call them or text them. And even that, takes me back to the helicopter parent thing, because of course I want to know where my kid is every second of the day. It's a luxury as a parent that my parents didn't have. And I just think about how we're also kind of suppressing our kids' ability to just kind of explore completely unsupervised, which is just a part of life and a part of growing up, when we can see their every move and know their every thought and see what they're doing and their conversations with their friends. I mean, it's no different than like reading your daughter's diary 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever. Or reading your son's, I don't know if he's keeping a journal, or like letters he's writing to his buddies. I mean, there's just a certain level of privacy that even our kids honestly deserve to have as they navigate growing up. And we have completely stripped them kind of that privacy, because as parents, we feel like, and we hear, you have to stay on top of your kids' phones and their iPads because you don't know what they're saying and you don't know, like, and you're just providing them with this platform to be able to do stuff like that. And I say this as a mother who, yes, my children don't have phones yet, but they do have iPads, which is basically the equivalent. And what are they using those iPads for? They use it to call friends and family sometimes. Like, I have a list of contacts that they can call and everybody else gets blocked, and they have to go through Messenger Kids where they cannot delete messages. And then they're gaming with their buddies, or maybe every once in a while I'll let them download some like artsy fartsy app that allows them to make reels or whatever. But they all just want to upload them to YouTube, and I don't give them YouTube on their iPads, specifically because I can't be over their shoulder every second of the day, and I don't want some crazy ass YouTube video popping up that sparks some interest in them to join some group or start to subscribe to some ideology that is not par with our family dynamic. And so, yeah, I know a lot of you are listening to this and you're like, oh God, you're totally overreacting or whatever. And some people are going to feel triggered by it, which is okay too. But again, I would ask that you pause and just kind of ask yourself the truth. Am I right? And are you, like me, in the same predicament as a parent where you just don't know what to do because you want to be able to have that contact with your kids? You want to be able to put them out into the world a little bit more and feel like you can get a hold of them or find them, via all the satellite connections, or just help them to fit in because a lot of their friends are doing it, which is hysterical. Because I remember, the old expression, if your friend was jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge, like, would you do it too? And it really is the same, again, if we're being honest. But I just feel like there's no denying that we're at the precipice of massive, massive technological shifts with the introduction of AI. And if we don't start getting more parents together and talking about this and thinking of alternative ways to support the world that our kids are growing up with while also not enabling them with the very tool that could severely impact their lives. Just think about all the kids, all the girls in particular who get sucked in through Roblox and their parents don't have their comment section locked down and they can chat with anybody they want. They can be friends with anybody they want. And next thing you know, they're being bribed to send nude photos of themselves. This is happening by the thousands. And every parent wants to think, oh, that'll never happen to my kid. That could never happen to my kid. But you'd be surprised how many kids it actually does happen to, and just the long-term psychological damage of these things. So I know I sound super doom and gloom and I'm not trying to, fear monger, but we really have to ask ourselves, like, who's raising the next generation? Who's raising the current generation? Is it the parents or is it the technology? And the technology is moving so fast and becoming so much smarter than we are that it's going to be next to impossible for it to not be influential in your kids' lives. And when you see things like the very creators of this technology starting to sound the alarm about just how detrimental this could possibly be, I think it's time to take heed, because if there's a time to do something about it, I think honestly the time is now. So what happens next? AI doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I think we can all agree that even if we do start to use our voices and speak to our leaders and tell people we're not going to vote for people that are going to come in and support this kind of rapid growth in the AI space, and we're not going to support companies like Roblox who aren't doing their due diligence and doing everything in their power because they're too driven by their profit and their bottom line to make our kids safer online. At the end of the day, we have to kind of ground ourselves and understand AI is not going away. Our kids are going to grow up with it no matter what. So the real question is, do we teach discernment or do we try to resist exposure, or a little sprinkling of both? Because there's a difference between overprotection and then just preparing our kids. And there's a difference between control versus capability. And so maybe the issue isn't that kids have too much screen time. Maybe it's that we handed over the role of shaping their worldview before we really understood what or who we were handing it to. And parents, it's moving so fast that it's hard for us to make informed decisions in a timely manner, again, without our kids just completely falling behind. But I would ask that you explore opportunities to get your kids a little bit out of the AI bubble, the tech bubble, the phone bubble. And if you're listening to this and you're a friend of mine, this isn't me saying I'm taking my kids off of their tech, but I do want to try to be more mindful, and I do want to try to coordinate with other parents. And if you're out there and you have ideas or you have some group that you have formed, again, I'm not I'm not radicalized, so I'm not planning on stripping my kids of all technology and moving to a farm in the middle of nowhere and living off the land and completely disconnecting from society. But I do feel like even in my own house, there could be a better balance, and I need to get with parents closer to me or whose kids are close with my kids and kind of align with them and hear them out. And maybe we all operate off of the same model so that no one kid feels like they're missing out or left out. So I'd love to hear from you on this topic. Email me whatafusterclucklk@gmail.com. And if you have any other resources that you can point me to, any groups that are sort of middle ground, not overly biased in one direction or another, share those with me and then I'll get them in the show notes or share them out or talk about them on a future episode, or maybe grab somebody who hosts one of those groups to come on and talk about the positive changes that they've seen in their kids and other people's kids. That would be fantastic. So please send those my way. In the meantime, thank you as always for listening. What a Fustercluck, available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit that like button, that share button, and that subscribe button. And until next week, thank you for listening.